Thanks to technology, you can make a blueprint of you through your DNA. And even when you pass away, generations to come can use your DNA as a way to know their heritage and possible susceptibility to diseases. I visited the Tharp Funeral Home in Lynchburg and found out about DNA banking as well as an upcoming seminar on cremation. Take a look.
We've tried for years at Tharp Funeral Home to have public informational seminars. Funerals and cremations, understandably, are not topics that people get excited about learning about, but it's important that they do know about them because, these services, they can be expensive, and if people have more information, they can make better decisions. We've found that when we bring the public in, we give them a tour of the crematory, talk about their options. When a death has not occurred, that they make a whole lot better decisions. And they actually appreciate it because we remove a lot of the mystery about the work that we do as funeral directors. So that's been really positive.
And it's actually a good financial decision to plan ahead, isn't it?
Oh, my goodness. Statistics will show that we will spend 30% less on our funeral services than our families will. That's because of something called emotional overspending. And it's understandable. We hear people every day come in and say, well, he was a good husband and this is the last thing I can do for him, or, she was a wonderful mom and I want to do this. The problem is, if you had asked the person they're talking about, they probably would have wanted the money to go to the grandkids and not to the funeral. And that's typically the case. We don't have as extravagant a wishes for ourselves as our families do frequently.
Mm-hmm. And since you're always in the middle of it all, is it good enough for somebody to just write something in their will about their wants for their funeral?
One of the seminars we do is titled The 10 Mistakes to Avoid in Funeral Planning. And the number one item on that list is putting your wishes in your will. The problem being, typically the will is read after the funeral. Sometimes deaths occur on a Friday, and if the will is in a lockbox, it's not going to be available until the following Monday. People have to make decisions. Understandably, though, they can't wait till Monday to make a funeral decision. They have to do that immediately after the death in most situations. And so that's definitely not the place to put your funeral plan.
Now let's talk about cremation as a whole in general. Is this becoming more and more popular?
Last year, 2013, in the Lynchburg and really all of Central Virginia, the cremation rate was 42%. So 42 out of every 100 services were cremation services. In Central Virginia, we're actually going to be north of 50% cremation rate in probably about the next 10 to 15 years. It's already that way in Florida and California and other large states. Many people are choosing cremation. When we talk to families, I think probably the first thing that comes to their mind is the expense. Typically, cremation services cost about half of what a burial service costs. But we're also seeing people really appreciate the flexibility of cremation. They have more time typically to have their services or have their arrangements. We're also finding with cremation families now, a lot of times they're having what we call traditional cremations, meaning they have a casket available for a visitation night. So people that come to the service, they don't even know that the person's being cremated because it looks like any other funeral they've ever been to for the last 100 years. The only difference being at the conclusion of the service, instead of getting in the hearse and going to the cemetery, we simply take the casket down to our crematory here in the building, and that's the conclusion. So again, those are two of the biggest changes have been, folks opting for, those traditional rituals. And I tell people this all the time, the rituals that surround death, they actually bring comfort to families. They're not easy, but doing the work of grief helps people get through their grief. If someone passes away and we don't have any service and we don't see the body and we don't talk about their death, we find that people psychologically have a much more difficult time getting through their grief.
And you have something interesting you're offering right now, and it's a little way to take a little part of someone you love along with you and possibly help generations to come. Tell us a little bit about these DNA services.
Well, we've partnered with a company called DNA Memorial, and we're actually the first funeral home in Central Virginia to offer this. It's mostly to cremation families, but it can be available to anyone. Obviously, when a person is cremated, all of their DNA is destroyed in that cremation process. We've found, and we hear about this in the news all the time, DNA is being used for medical research. We can find out 75% of all the diseases that humans suffer from are actually genetic in origin, meaning we had some disposition towards cancer or a disposition towards heart disease. And by having that DNA, we can see our susceptibility. What are our chances of contracting a certain cancer or a certain illness, whether it be Alzheimer's or any of the others we've talked about. The other reason people are trying to now begin safekeeping their DNA is for genealogical reasons. And you probably know someone in your family that loves looking at the family tree and figuring out that. Our DNA is literally the blueprint for who we are. It's much more intricate, obviously, than even a fingerprint about our identities. And we can look back and look at a person's DNA and tell, what percentage Irish are they, what percentage Native American are they, and people can take their parents' DNA and have that analysis done and find out, where are my mom and dad really from, because that obviously has an impact on where they're from. So it's enormously exciting. Certainly, I think the scientific side or the medical side of knowing what diseases I could be susceptible to because of, my ancestry is probably the foremost reason we see people that are opting to use this service. But it's very affordable. It's easy to do. And as we tell folks all the time, once that cremation has taken place, we can't go back and do it. So we're finding a lot of families are appreciating the peace of mind of knowing, what, we have this DNA memorial, we have this blueprint saved, so as science continues to advance, we'll be able to take advantage of any of those new developments.
And there are 2 cremation seminars coming up. The first is this Wednesday at Tharp Funeral Home in Lynchburg. For more information, 434-237-9424. And the second one is Wednesday, May 7th at Tharp Funeral Home in Bedford, 540-586-3443 for more information. And also more information is at tharpfuneralhome.com.